Hi and welcome to Viewmaster Travels. My name's Dave and today we're going to take a look at Reel 76. This is Mount Vernon, Virginia. We stopped by George Washington's old home on our way out of Washington, D.C. and we took the tour of the beautiful mansion, but truth is, we didn't really think it was that interesting, and it wasn't until after we got back and I was doing the research for this video that I discovered all kinds of interesting details that we didn't see while we were there, like all the farming technologies that George Washington invented, and the mystery of the blue room and the scientific analysis of what color it was really supposed to be, and the women who grouped together in the 19th century to save the plantation for the future. So as much as our tour at the time was really pleasant, there's so much more to know about Mount Vernon. Here's a quick timeline of the place to get us started. In 1674, tobacco grower, military colonel, and politician John Washington, along with his cousin, neighbor, and co-customs collector Nicholas Spencer, were granted 5,000 acres of land in Virginia, originally given by King Charles II to Sir John Culpeper as part of a political payoff for his support during the English Civil War. The land was eventually split up and passed down to Augustine Washington, George Washington's father. Augustine deeded it to his son Lawrence in 1740. Lawrence was George Washington's half-brother. Lawrence inherited the property in 1743 and renamed it Mount Vernon after Admiral Edward Vernon, who he'd served under in the military during the War of Jenkins' Ear. At this point, George Washington was only 11 years old, and he often stayed at Mount Vernon with his older brother Lawrence. Lawrence died in 1752, and his wife Anne inherited the estate. Anne had remarried and no longer lived there, so she leased it to George Washington so that he could continue to manage her estate. When Anne died in 1761, George Washington assumed ownership of Mount Vernon. Truth is, I'm skipping a bunch of steps here because the history of Mount Vernon is really complicated. You start to realize the challenge the museum faces as they try to explain all this to visitors. We weren't really aware of any of this as we wandered through the modern museum to buy our tickets and then followed the map to find our first Viewmaster location. The Bowling Green entrance. As you can see, this view is unchanged since the Viewmaster picture was taken 75 years ago, and it's pretty much unchanged from the view visitors would have had in Washington's day. What you don't see today is the size of the property that Washington managed at the time. When he ran the estate, there were 5 separate farms here. These farms were known as the Mansion House Farm, the River Farm, the Muddy Hole Farm, Dogue Run Farm, and the Union Farm. Together they covered 7,600 acres and were worked by enslaved people. There were 317 enslaved people working Washington's farms when he died in 1799. George Washington was born into an American aristocratic class that doesn't really exist anymore today, the planter class. These were people who were given or who had inherited enormous plantations, as well as the slave labor that worked them. The idea was to produce what had become known as a cash crop, an agricultural crop you didn't intend to eat, but intended to sell for a profit. In Washington's case, this was tobacco, which had become pretty much the only thing anyone in Virginia grew since Pocahontas' husband, John Rolfe, started growing it in 1612. At the time, you could pay for things like your taxes directly with tobacco leaves, so Washington was literally growing his own money. But growing tobacco took a lot of manual labor, and the most profitable labor was slave labor. Washington had inherited 11 enslaved people from his father in 1750, but added 84 more when he married Martha Custis in 1759. When he got ownership of the estate, he had 95 enslaved people working almost every job on the plantation. Blacksmiths, shoemakers, cooks, maids, waiters, carpenters, coopers, overseers, field workers, a small army under his control. Writer Washington Irving said that a Virginia plantation was a little empire. The mansion house was the seat of government with its numerous dependencies, such as kitchens, smokehouse, workshops, and stables. If Mount Vernon was an empire, George Washington was its emperor. And don't forget, while he was running this little empire, he was simultaneously commander of the Continental Army and later president of the newly formed United States. Today, however, none of this was evident to us as we strolled the pleasant bowling green to our next Viewmaster destination. The mansion and courtyard from the bowling green. It's a pleasant stroll across the grass to get this iconic image of Mount Vernon. This is the mansion house, with its slightly off-center window scheme and 2 extra wings connected by palisades. The history of the mansion itself is well explained throughout the tour. Here's a quick rundown. When Washington lived on the property, his house was a modest 1.5-story building with a central hall and 4 small rooms, built by Washington's father, Augustine. Washington married Martha Custis in 1759 and added a second floor to the building for her. The construction took place while Washington was away leading Virginian troops against a French fort in what would eventually become Pittsburgh. In 1774, he began a multi-year expansion, adding additions to each end of the house and expanding the dependent buildings and gardens, including creating the bowling green. Construction took place while Washington was away leading the Continental Army against the British to win the Revolutionary War. Washington didn't return full-time to Mount Vernon for 8 years. War had been unkind to the plantation, and it took several years to complete the building. The final embellishment, a weather vane, was installed in 1787. Construction took place while Washington was away, creating a new government and helping to write the U.S. Constitution. Mount Vernon was considered a gentleman's country seat, a New World version of an English country house, a large mansion and gardens nestled among manicured parks and meadows. It was flanked by dependencies, buildings serving supporting functions like the shoemaker's shop, the stove room, the blacksmith's shop, spinning house, salt house, kitchen, storehouse, coach house, plus servants' and slaves' quarters. There were 2 main gardens, the upper garden and greenhouse, mostly for decorative flowers, exotic fruits, and ornamental trees, and the lower garden, fruits, vegetables, and herbs used to feed the family and staff. Today, nothing remains of the larger farms, but the mansion house and dependencies are preserved exactly as they were during Washington's reign. Here's another famous view. The piazza, east front of the mansion. This is the view of the mansion from the east lawn. The facade was undergoing reconstruction at the time. Even so, you can easily see this high columned veranda, or piazza, extending the full length of the house. This area acted like an outdoor room, as guests would drink afternoon tea here, shaded from the sun, while overlooking the 18-acre deer park spanning the area between the mansion and the Potomac River. For us, since there was construction, we had to sit away from the building in the sun, but in Washington's time, this clever design would have cooled the upper rooms and directed the afternoon breezes through the house. The piazza design was entirely Washington's idea, a complete architectural innovation at the time, and indicates just how forward-thinking Washington was as an architect as well as a leader and farmer. He was well aware of his aristocratic station in life and felt it was his duty as a wealthy farmer to experiment with new farming techniques so that everyone else could benefit from what he learned. And it was good that he did so, since when war broke out with England, the Virginia General Assembly voted to stop selling tobacco to England entirely. When Washington returned to Mount Vernon after the Revolution, he urgently needed to figure out what new crops might sell. He kept extensive journals of his crop experimentations and their economic viability, sharing the information freely, eventually becoming an honorary member of the Philadelphia Society for Promoting Agriculture, as well as the English Board of Agriculture. He scientifically tested and raised nearly 60 different crops at Mount Vernon, often in his personal botanical garden, before settling on wheat as his new main cash crop, which eventually became far more profitable than tobacco ever was. Over the years, tobacco had severely exhausted his soil, so he implemented a complicated crop rotation scheme, switching from buckwheat to wheat to clover to grass to clover to corn and potatoes to wheat again in a 7-year rotation, with different crops on each field each year. He also implemented the latest in modern farming technology, importing designs from England, then modifying them to his local requirements and building them on site. For example, the spiky roller, an 1,100-pound spiked wooden cylinder with a chair on top, pulled by oxen, used to break up the clumpy Virginia soil. And the Winlaw's machine, used to separate the wheat grain from stalks. Washington observed one in use and realized how much more efficient it was, so he built one himself. As an improvement to that, he designed and built a radical new structure at Mount Vernon, the 16-sided treading barn. This was a 2-story barn. You'd put wheat on the upper floor and allow horses to trot around inside the circular barn, treading on the wheat. Washington had designed the floor with 1.5-inch gaps so the wheat berries would fall through to the ground where they could be stored until processed. This barn technology was unique, and it's the oldest circular barn known in the U.S. We could have spent hours learning about Washington's farming innovations, but our tour of the house was starting, so we met in the old servants' hall and went inside the mansion. Built-in bookcases in the library.
Different years, Rosamond. I can't even remember them all. That's one. And this is one too.
Most of the Viewmaster pictures I have are from inside the mansion, and most of the rooms and views are unchanged since everything is meant to remain as Washington had it, although it seems a lot of the furniture and knickknacks move around. Anyway, let's take a look at a few rooms and learn a few things. First off, this isn't the library, this is Washington's private study. The globe by the window is original, ordered by Washington during his first year as president since he required the largest, most accurate cartographic equipment available. It was removed from under the window in 2005 and underwent extensive repair. It's now in the museum. The library contained 884 volumes when Washington died, including Batty Langley's New Principles of Gardening, 1728, and A New System of Agriculture, or A Plain, Easy, and Demonstrative Method of Speedily Growing Rich, from 1755. Most of his books went to the Library of Congress, the Boston Athenaeum, or private collectors after Washington died. Today, the association has reacquired more than 100 of them. This one's labeled as the West Parlor, although today they call it the Front Parlor. The painting above the fireplace is an original oil painting from 1757. Washington asked for a neat landscape that fit the space, and this was sent from London, although the artist is unknown. Above that is his coat of arms, carved from wood. In the Viewmaster picture, it's been painted silver and red, but today it's white. I got curious as to when it was repainted, and started going through the old handbooks that were provided to tour guides at Mount Vernon, and in this 1985 guidebook, the entire room is blue. The handbook describes it as Prussian blue, and the room was painted back to blue in 1980. It says this was because it was originally painted this color in 1787. The decision to repaint the room blue was based on a letter from Washington's farm manager William Pierce describing the room as the blue parlor, as well as analysis of paint chips off the wall showing a blue layer. However, the proper color of the room remained a nagging mystery, and in 2015, when the room needed restoring again, scientists decided to answer the question once and for all. As part of the restoration, they had to take all the panels off the walls, and that gave them a new opportunity to look at the paint chips. They put a 1/4-inch sample under 250 times magnification and realized that the white layer, underneath the Prussian blue one, contains zinc oxide, a common ingredient in white paint. However, zinc oxide wasn't used in house paint until 1845. Therefore, the room must have been blue sometime after 1845, and it must have been white when Washington was alive, so they repainted it white again. Every room in the mansion is like this. Every little detail or object has been carefully analyzed and reanalyzed, and that made me wonder who was responsible for all this. Tomb of George and Martha Washington. Washington died unexpectedly in 1799, and Martha died a couple years later. The estate passed down to Washington's nephew and eventually to his great-grandnephew, John Augustine Washington III. He didn't just inherit a plantation, it also came with a bunch of nosy trespassing tourists, making pilgrimages to the home of the nation's founding father, so he decided to sell the property to the government. However, the Civil War was looming, and neither the federal government nor the state of Virginia was willing to buy into his unexpected tourist attraction. Meanwhile, neighboring plantation mistress Louisa Bird Cunningham was sailing down the Potomac past the estate and saw the deteriorated condition of Washington's home. She told this to her daughter, Anne Pamela Cunningham, who was inspired to make it her life's work to save the estate. Cunningham founded the Mount Vernon Ladies Association in 1853, saying, "If the men of America have seen fit to allow the home of its most respected hero to go to ruin, why can't the women of America band together to save it?" Cunningham realized that the estate was for sale and was worried that northern capitalists would buy it and turn it into a resort hotel. She wrote letters to newspapers in southern states asking for money to help protect the estate from greedy businessmen and corrupt politicians. She needed $200,000, but only managed to raise a few hundred. The association realized they'd need support from the northern states as well. So as the country was becoming more divided, they took it upon themselves to unite everyone under a common cause to save Mount Vernon. They were soon on their way to raising the $200,000 they needed, but had a new problem. Women could not hold title to property in Virginia. So they petitioned the state of Virginia to grant them a charter to become the country's first nonprofit corporation in 1856. As the corporation, they could legally purchase Mount Vernon. In 1860, the MVLA officially took possession of Mount Vernon. Over the next 138 years, the MVLA has maintained ownership of the estate, reacquiring original artifacts and carefully restoring the structures. The restoration of the buildings has been going on for longer than the buildings were in use in the first place. It makes me realize the enormous challenge this presents to museums. I'm sure they must want to share the excitement they feel about their subject, but it would be very easy to overwhelm visitors with information. I have to admit that I didn't pick up on most of what I've subsequently learned while we were touring Mount Vernon, but our tour did inspire me to dig into it later. And thinking about it now, I realize that's the point. The root of the word museum is muse, so a place of inspiration, and that's exactly what Mount Vernon is. Well, that's it for this one. Thanks for watching.